This is Autohaus Z, and we're here again for another transmission tech tips video. So I'm working on this Nissan 240SX S14 transmission, and there's a difference between the S14 and the S13. Some of the differences: reverse gear actually has a synchronizer for it, second gear has a multi-piece synchro, and then the input shaft is actually thicker on a S14. I'm doing a rebuild on this transmission for a time attack car, so one thing really critical was getting exactly the correct parts for this build. Today we're going to talk about these two bearings in the center case for the output in the countershaft, then also the input shaft. And you can see just from here that brown shield on that bearing. I bought a rebuild kit, and to my dismay, these are the wrong bearings, and let's find out why. Alright, so you can tell this is the correct kit because there's a C designation at the end of this transmission. This transmission has an A, B, and C designation at the end depending on what year you got. And you can see these bearings are all unshielded. This is the input bearing. You can tell because there's that groove cut in it for the C-clip, and then these are the two center bearings for that case. So as you guys saw before with the tore down transmission, those bearings were shielded, and then more importantly, those bearings were shielded on both sides. Why are these shields important? So these shields serve two purposes. One, it holds the oil inside this bearing, so this guy constantly gets lubricated. If you can imagine, in these type of bearings, there's nothing to hold the oil in there, so when this guy spins, oil can still get slung out. The other thing, so like the rear output bearing on a T50 where it's shielded in the rear, so oil doesn't go into the bearing and just go all the way out and slosh into the tail shaft. It'll stay, majority of the oil will stay in this bearing and then inside the transmission. These shields are also important because they also keep foreign contaminants like dirt and debris out of these bearings. I understand why Nissan chose these three bearings to be double shielded, because these three have the hardest job in the transmission. So these two being in the center case, they support both shafts and they're loaded up at all times. The input shaft has a really tough job. If you can imagine the power flow, every single gear you're in has to be transferred through the input shaft, which means this guy, the input shaft and the input bearing, has one of the toughest jobs also. So in this instance, knowing that this is going to be a time attack car, these bearings need to be the correct double shielded ones, and I had a super tough time sourcing these guys. These three came from the UAE. Funny is just like T50, where I guess these didn't get bought enough in the US, and now these are all discontinued in the US. But yeah, even if this was my street car, I'd be hesitant to use these bearings still. I take that back. So the only time I would run these unshielded bearings is if this was like a dedicated street car. This thing saw like no mountain runs, no nothing. This was just the car I put around on the street. Otherwise, the Nissan factory decided on double shielded bearings, so during a rebuild, that's what they need to stay. A long time ago in my early days of building T50s, I actually got the wrong kit, and the the output shaft center bearing, so like the equivalent of this guy, was also unshielded, when from the factory those bearings come double shielded, just like this guy. So what ended up happening was that during a track day, slowly the transmission made more and more noise until finally the noise was unbearable, and when I tore the trans down, that output shaft center bearing actually exploded. The race came out, and then the bulbs all came out of this bearing. And so again, the manufacturer designed the certain bearings to be double shielded for a reason. In that instance, this output shaft center bearing, because it's loaded up all the time, it's in the middle of that entire output shaft assembly. This guy has a really tough job and needs to be clean and completely lubricated at all times, which a open face bearing is not going to allow. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. If you'd like to see more transmission tech tip videos or whatever topic, leave a comment below. And yeah, thank you guys for watching.